All right, we are ready to go. Hello, welcome to another episode of Torn Book Club on this August 9th, 2015. I am your host, Saruman, aka Josh, and my hair is crazy as always because it's hot and stupid outside. so, so hello everybody. We are back today talking about the Silmarillion, as we have been doing for months now. Uh, we're getting into some pretty cool stories at this point. We're going to be doing 2 weeks on this next chapter, which is one of the bigger and more famous Tolkien stories that is not The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. This is the story of Túrin Turambar. This is... Yeah, my phone is making noises. What was I talking about? Túrin Turambar. He is a character that is explored in great detail in a lot of different stories in Tolkien's world. This chapter in the Silmarillion, however, is the shortest version of it. There's a more expanded version of this story in Unfinished Tales, and then there is the full novelized version of the story that is The Children of Hurin, which I was deliberately not going to read so that I could focus just on what is in the Silmarillion. But yesterday I picked it up and started reading it because, you guys, the audiobook is narrated by Christopher Lee. It's freaking amazing. And it's absolutely enthralling to listen to. So I got through a good bit of The Children of Hurin yesterday, probably about 5-6 chapters, which really only covers maybe like the first little bit of this story. But we're gonna be talking about this over this week and next week. And I had to find... It was hard for me to find a stopping point for this first part. With Beren and Luthien, it was easy because because there's a good stopping point right in the middle. Here, the midpoint is kind of in the middle of a major plot thread. So I'm going to be ending this part a little bit before the halfway point, at a point where I feel like a good subplot is wrapped up, and then we're about to move on to a next one. So that is how we're going to be handling Túrin Turambar. So, I Stole the One Ring is having a frozen screen moment. Okay. I Stole the One Ring. Hopefully you can restart your computer or refresh the page and it will fix the problem. Anyway, moving on. We've got a lot to cover in this episode. We're going to be doing this over this week and next week. The following week after that, we're going to be doing 2 chapters at once because they're shorter. They're shorter and they cover some pretty big moments, and we're going to have a guest on for that week, Demosthenes, who runs the Hall of Fire chat here at the One Ring. So he's going to be bringing his insight into that because he's been doing discussions like this on the Torn chat for years now. What I'm going to try to talk about a little bit after this is some of the differences between what is here in the Silmarillion and what you see in The Children of Hurin. There's a lot of expansions, and the order in which things happen is changed a little bit. So anyway, let us get into the tale of Túrin Turambar. Oh yeah, there isn't a book of the month this month, so that we can spend more time focusing on the Silmarillion. And there probably won't be one for September either, so that we can get through all of the Silmarillion by the end of September. So without further ado, let us begin. I apologize in advance for any sort of scattering or lack of visual aids this time around. I didn't have as much time to put together the normal, very comprehensive amount of visual aids that I do for this. We've got quite a few, but not as much as I would like. So, the story of Túrin Turambar begins not with Turin at all. It doesn't even begin with his father. It begins with a story about his cousin, Tuor. It begins with Tuor and his mother Rian, who was she was the wife of Huor, who is Hurin's brother. Hurin is Turin's father, so you have Turin, son of Hurin, and Tuor, son of Huor. So, now, Rian was only married to Huor for a short while before he went into the big battle, the Near Naeth Arnoediad. And if you remember from our episode from a couple weeks ago, he didn't survive that battle. Ustreamer 7991 is saying he can't load the live stream. I would suggest to just try refreshing the page. That might help. Of course, you can't see this because you can't load the live stream. So anyway, so Huor went to the big battle of the Near Naeth Arnoediad, and he didn't return. Now, Rian was pregnant with Tuor at this time, and actually, I'm going to change this just a little bit. There we go. So Rian was pregnant with Tuor, and she was also very despondent over the fact that Huor was not coming back, and they weren't getting any word from anybody about what had happened to him. And so eventually she gave birth to Tuor, and she left him to be raised by the Grey Elves of Mithrim, which are a group of elves who live in the let me go back to the map. Let me bring up the map so you can see where all this stuff is. Let's get rid of Turin there. Now on the map, where everything is located, where it's all starting, is in this area here called Dorlomin. And Dorlomin is the realm of men in this wider area called Hithlum, which is the realm of the High King of the Noldor, which at this point is practically nobody, because it was Fingolfin died, then it was Fingon, and Fingon just recently died, and all the elves are scattered. Now, there are some Grey Elves who are elves who stayed behind without going to Valinor, and they set up an area here around this lake called Mithrim. And Rian leaves her son Tuor with them. and she goes off to find Huor, and discovers the giant pile of dead bodies that the orcs had put up after the Near Neath Arnoediad. And she was so grief-stricken, she died from it. And so Tuor was then raised by the Grey Elves, and that's all we hear about him, because he will figure into a later story. But this story does open up with that little bit about Tuor's origins. Now, the focus of the main story itself, of course, is... Here he is Túrin, who was also born and raised in Dorloman. And he was actually born before the Near Neath Arnoediad, and he lived a good life. His father, Hurin, was the king of the men of Dorloman, so he had a bit of a privileged life. What is it? Herivandi is saying, there sure is a lot of dying in this story. Yes, there is. And in this story in particular, there are a number of main characters who will meet their end by the end of this story. Only one of whom we're going to get to this week. I think just one. Yeah, I think just one this week. But it's a big one. So Túrin was raised by his parents, Hurin, and his wife, Morwen. Let me get a picture of her up here. There we go. There's Morwen. And she is known very much as, like, almost an elven type of lady. The nickname she's given is Elethwen, which means... I think it means like elven lady or something like that. And she's human, but she has a very elvish sort of bearing to her. And after the Near Neath Arnoediad, Hurin is, of course, captured and then cursed by Morgoth personally for basically mocking him and not giving him the information he wants. And part of that curse is that Morgoth has cursed all of Hurin's family, and they're going to descend into darkness and despair. And Hurin will be forced to watch it using Morgoth's far-seeing vision, while being unable to do anything about it. And so the first part of it begins here in Dorloman with Morwen and Túrin. Actually, no, it begins before that with... this actually happens before the Near Neath. I'm getting ahead of myself. With Túrin's sister, Lilith. And that name means laughter. And she is this happy, jovial little girl. Everybody loves her. Túrin loves her. And the first big tragedy of Túrin's life happens here, when one of Morgoth's special attacks on the region of Hithlum is to send a pestilence down that way. And I believe they call it the Dark Breath or something like that. And Túrin gets sick from it and recovers. Lilith, however, gets sick and dies. And this affects Túrin very deeply because he loved his sister very much. And so we begin to see sort of the beginnings of Túrin's the building of his character as this very tragic sort of person. And so after the death of Lilith, and after a number of years, Hurin does get together with the giant muster of the elves, and they go to the Near Neath Arnoediad, and he is captured. And after Morgoth's devastating victory at the Near Neath, he sends a group of people into Dorloman to sort of take over, and those people are the Easterlings, who helped him to turn the tide of the war by betraying Maethros, and this was Morgoth's reward to them, that they could get Dorloman and nothing else. And so the Easterlings came into Dorloman and pretty much became just horrible taskmasters and usurpers. They took everybody's property. They took everybody who was capable and made slaves out of them. It was a terrible, terrible time to live in. But one person they didn't mess with was Morwen, because she had such an elvish bearing. She scared the crap out of the Easterlings, so they always kind of gave her and her family a wide berth. But Morwen still feared that at some point Turin would be taken and made a slave by the Easterlings. So she devises in secret to send Turin as a child with a couple guards out to Doriath to be sheltered by King Thingol, which, knowing what we know about Thingol right now, doesn't seem like the wisest of choices, because he's kind of a jerk. But Doriath is also one of the few safe havens left in Middle Earth. And so she has Turin leave Dorloman because she is also pregnant with another child, and so she can't make the journey. And so she assures Turin that she will come at some point and she will visit him. She will be rejoined with him one day, and he will meet his new sister one day. Turin isn't too happy about this, but he eventually agrees, and they go into Doriath, where they are first met by. Let me bring him up here. Where they are first met by a character we've met before, Beleg Strongbow, or Beleg Cuthalion. I Stole the One Ring seems to be having lots of internet troubles. I am very sorry. We will have there is the YouTube archive that will be coming, so you can watch that. I'm sorry, I Stole the One Ring. Eravandi really loves Beleg. And Beleg is a great character. I love him too. So he meets them on the borders of Doriath, and he agrees to escort them into Menegroth and present them to King Thingol, and let him decide whether or not he will take them in. So it's at this point we meet Thingol again, and this time, and in this story, we see a very different side of Thingol. Up to this point, he's been very stoic. He's been very standoffish. He hasn't been very welcoming of people. He's been very adversarial with the Noldor and the Sons of Feanor for very good reasons. But his heart was softened after everything that happened with Baron, and he welcomes Turin into Doriath and agrees to adopt him as his foster son. At which point, Turin is then raised by Thingol and the elves. Eravandi saying, yeah, Thingol seems to have gotten so much nicer by the time Turin got there. He is. He still can be hard, but he's not quite as hard as he was in the past. But he will not stay this way. Not in this story, but in later stories, he kind of goes off the deep end. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, and I don't want to spoil anything. But for now, Thingol is a very nice, very amiable king, and he welcomes Turin with open arms, and he agrees to raise him. And he also agrees to keep in rather constant contact with Dorloman, sending messengers back and forth to Morrowind just to give her updates on how Turin is growing, and she's giving him updates on her life and his and Turin's new sister named Nienor. But and she also sends various tokens of love to Turin, and the one big thing that she sends to him is the Dragon Helm of Hador. Now, the Dragon Helm is a very special helmet that was designed almost as kind of a mockery of Glaurung the dragon, and it was designed by Hador, who is one of the fathers of the great houses of the Edain. And this was designed specifically to strike fear into the hearts of orcs. And so it's a mockery. It really makes the wearer seem very dominant. And this is one of the major heirlooms of the House of Hador. And since Turin is pretty much the heir of Hador at this point, he's pretty much the next in line for the kingship. She gives him the helm, and he sort of grows into it over time, while he's being raised and trained by the elves, and he is trained primarily in the art of war by Beleg Strongbow. And we get a lot more of that in the Children of Hurin than we do in this chapter of the Silmarillion, but they develop a very strong bond of friendship, to the point where Thingol actually sort of takes Turin away because he doesn't want him getting too caught up in the ways of war. But eventually, the orcs start taking over the lands, and the journey between Doriath and Dorloman becomes too perilous. And Thingol stops sending messengers to and from Doriath, and so Turin stops getting messages and updates from his mother, and this really upsets him. And so he begs Thingol to go out, to give him leave to go to Dorloman and see his mother and his sister and try to bring them back to Doriath. Now, Thingol doesn't allow this. He doesn't want Turin making that journey because it's just too dangerous, and he doesn't want him. He's basically trying to protect him, but he does concede a little bit and says, "I won't allow you to go all that way, but if you really want to help make this land better so that we can make that journey again, I will make you a soldier in my army, and you can fight the orcs up in the north marches of Doriath," which is not really what Turin wanted, but he agrees to it because he gets to fight alongside his friend Beleg. And together they fight off the orcs, and Turin dons the dragon helm and strikes fear into the hearts of the orcs, and the orcs really do they're terrified by him, and they begin spreading these rumors of this dragon helm that is worn by this terrible enemy, and that's one of the first clues to Morgoth, as to the location of Hurin's son, because the dragon helm is the heirloom of that line, and he knows that anybody who would wear it would have to be the heir of Hador, and the only heir of Hador who is left is Turin, son of Hurin. So he realizes that this is Turin, who is slaughtering these elves up around Doriath. And so he begins putting together larger groups of orcs and spies to come down into that area. Herivandi saying, I actually drew the dragon helm once, but I don't think it would strike fear into any orcs. Well, that's okay. It takes a lot to scare an orc. I mean, I really like this version of the dragon helm because it's elegant. Um, it's and it is like very impressive. Like if you were to see that on a battlefield, you would go, "Whoa, who is that?" So after years of fighting the orcs, Turin comes back to Menegroth and basically just to relax. And this is when we meet up with another character, a Nandor elf, who is a counselor to Thingol. His name is Seros. And Seros is not really a very nice guy. That's putting it mildly. He doesn't really like men very much, and he cares for Turin even less. Um, uh, Saros, he likes to openly mock Turin, and Turin, being the kind of person that he is, he like tries to hold back his angry outbursts until at one point Saros pushes the right buttons and basically starts insulting the women of Dorloman. And since Turin has been doing all of this fighting specifically for his mother and his sister, that's basically like the last straw for him. And he throws a goblet at Saros and it smashes him in the face. And Saros feels like he needs to get some sort of recompense, some sort of revenge for that. And so later on, when Beleg is he's leaving to rejoin, or no, sorry, Turin is leaving to rejoin Beleg, and Saros confronts him, and they have a big fight, and Turin is able to beat him down, but then he sort of returns the mockery that Saros had given him and strips him of all his clothes and has him run about the forest naked like a wild animal. And Saros is so terrified by this that he runs wildly off a cliff and into a river. Which there are lots of pictures of this, and it is a very serious situation, but every picture I've seen of this, it always looks hilarious. I hate the fact that I laugh at these pictures, but it is a very weird looking situation. But Saros, in fear, runs off a cliff into a riverbed and dies. And where am I? And this is seen, or at least part of it is seen, by another one of Thingol's commanders, another person we've met before, Mablung. And from Mablung's perspective, it looks like Turin has either killed or played a major part in the murder of Saros. And he tells Turin, you need to come with me. We need to go to Thingol, and we need to seek his judgment on this. And Turin is terrified of this, and he feels that he won't get a fair trial, and so he doesn't go with Mablung. Instead, he just runs off. And so, because he runs off, Mablung still takes the story back to Thingol, and Turin is tried in absentia. And after hearing all the facts and everything, and in The Children of Hurin, it goes into much more detail, which I'll discuss after this. Thingol agrees Thingol finally decides that he's going to pardon Turin and welcome him back to Doriath with open arms. And so, but he has no way of getting that message out to Turin because he doesn't know where Turin is. And so, our good friend here, Beleg, offers to go out into the wilds because he is such a good friend to Turin, and he's going to find him. He's going to go out into the wild and try to find Turin and bring him back to Doriath and tell him that he's been pardoned of this crime and that he is welcome in Doriath. And after some searching, Beleg does find a group of outlaws. I Stole the One Ring is asking, did Tolkien kill all of them off? Pretty much. Oh, I Stole the One Ring meant all the chatters. No, I don't think Tolkien meant that. I don't think Tolkien killed them off. I think everybody is just really listening or doing other things. But anyway, so Beleg volunteers to go out and find Turin. Now Turin, out in the wilds, has taken up with a gang of houseless outlaws. And so, and after a time, he also becomes the captain of these outlaws, and Beleg finally comes across the camp of them, but Turin is gone, and they are suspicious of him. So the outlaws take Beleg and tie him up and basically torment him and torture him. And in the Children of Hurin, they are just about to brand him when Turin finally shows up and they see what they've been doing to Beleg. And Turin frees Beleg because this is his old friend, this is his old best friend. Where did my thing go? Oh, there it is. Okay. This is his best friend, and he admonishes the outlaws for what they've done, and that's when Beleg tells him the whole story about how Turin has been pardoned, you're welcome back in Doriath, and more than that, we need you, because Morgoth has been sending more and more orcs down into the North Marches, and we need every able hand we can get, and you're one of our greatest warriors. And Turin, either out of a sense of loyalty to these outlaws or out of a sense of pride, he opts not to do that. He tells Beleg, no, I won't go back with you, I'm going to stay here. And Beleg tries to convince him to come back with him. Turin won't hear of it. And so Beleg finally says, well, I can't force you. All I can do is tell you. But I'm very sad about this. And so on the day that Beleg is going to leave to return to Doriath, he and Turin go for a little bit of a walk. And Beleg tells Turin, if you change your mind and you want to come back, you can find me in this area called Dimbar, which is where a lot of the orcs are starting to take over, and he's going back to fight them. And Turin counters by saying, well, if you want to find me, you can find me here on this random mountain here called Amun Ruth, which is one that he just happens to see. But it's also like, this is also the first sign of like a little bit of a prescience on the part of Turin. uh, oh, excuse me, too much coffee. Um, so um, so this is a sort of a prescient moment for Turin because he just picks this hill at random because it happened to be in his eye line, and he tells Beleg, if you want to find me, you can find me there on that place, that Ammon Ruth place, which he knows nothing about, but it will play a role later on. And so in the book it says, and they departed in friendship, but in sadness. And Beleg returns to Doriath and tells Thingol all about what happened. And Thingol's sad about this, and he knows there's nothing that he can really do. Like, what does he say here? He basically just sort of says, like, what more would Turin have me do? Uh, so but Beleg says you can send me back to Turin, and I will take care of him. I will guard him, and I will guide him. Um, and But there's also the orcs in Dimbar that I want to take care of, and Thingol, in another uncharacteristic moment of generosity, says, Beleg, you have served me very well. Ask me of any gift, and I will give it to you. And uh, did I? No, we talked about the whole part. I stole the One Ring and Eravandi are saying that they somehow missed the whole thing with the outlaws tying Beleg up to a tree. I'm pretty sure I talked about that. Because this is so Thingol says to Beleg, "You can have any gift of mine. Um, you can have anything you want of me." And Beleg says, "What I really need is a good sword." And so Thingol says, "You can have any sword you want except my own personal sword." And so Beleg chooses a very special sword called Anglachel, which is a black sword. And the black sword is there's only one of two, and they were both forged by Aeol, the Dark Elf, who we probably remember from a while ago. And what I love is Tolkien's description of how this sword was forged. Um, okay. It was a sword of great worth, and it was so named because it was made of iron that fell from heaven as a blazing star. So basically, this is made up of some sort of weird meteorite ore. Um, and there's only two swords like it. Both of them were made by Aeol. This one was given to Thingol by Aeol as a fee for being allowed to live on the outskirts of Doriath. And Beleg chooses this sword to be his. And so what was I gonna say? So so yeah. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought here. Um, so Beleg takes the sword, but then Melian looks at the sword and gives sort of like a very ominous prophecy about it. Uh, what does she say? She says, "There is malice in this sword. The dark heart of the smith still dwells in it. It will not love the hand it serves, nor will it abide with you long." And Beleg says, "Nonetheless, I will wield it while I may." And so Beleg takes the sword, and then Melian gives him a very special gift. A gift that we probably know a lot about. That gift is lembas bread. She gives him a huge store of lembas. Now, the giving of lembas is actually a very important thing. It is done only by the queen. Everybody's saying, "Why Beleg? Of all the swords, why that one?" You know what? I'm going to say because it probably looked pretty badass. uh, so, um, so anyway, Melian gives Beleg a large stock of lembas bread, and she also gives him permission to share it with anybody who may need it, which is a huge deal because this is the first time ever that lembas has been given to, or at least potentially been given to, a man. It had only been distributed among the elves, but because she's giving it to Beleg, who will at some point in time obviously be giving it to Turin, this is the first time lembas has ever been given to a man, and this is a really huge deal, and this is a very big favor. That she is bestowing upon Turin. So so Beleg leaves with these gifts, and he's given permission to go where he will. He can go to Dimbar and fight the orcs. He can go back into the wilds of Brethil and try to find Turin again. And Beleg opts to go fight in Dimbar, at least to clear out the orcs as much as he can. And so he goes and he's wielding the black sword, and he's fighting the good fight, and he does take out a lot of orcs, and he's able to clear a lot of Dimbar. And then when around winter comes, Beleg vanishes. He just up and disappears. And nobody knows where he went. But we'll find out where he went in a little while. Meanwhile, Baron, or sorry, no, not Baron, Turin. I Stole the One Ring is saying, I take it the sword is important, very important. The sword is going to play a very big role in a lot of things to come. So, where were we? So, meanwhile, with Turin and the outlaws, things are starting to get a lot hairier for them because the winter is getting closer. They don't have any shelter. The orcs are getting more numerous, and they're trying to find a place out of the wild where they can stay through the winter. And it just so happens that they come across 3 dwarves, and they try to capture them. 2 of them run off, but the last one, who is old and slow, they capture him. Now, when the first 2 run off, one of Turin's men shoots an arrow at them. We don't see what happens, but that's going to come up later. So they capture this one dwarf who was left behind, and Turin tries to show mercy on him because he is a dwarf, and he has made a vow that he will only bring harm and injury to the enemy than the servants of Morgoth. And this is a dwarf. A dwarf is not a servant of Morgoth. So he tries to talk to him, and we learn that this dwarf's name is Mime, and he is M-I-M, Mime. He's an old dwarf. He's lived a long, hard life. And he offers to Turin something of a ransom to spare his life, and that ransom is, you can stay with me in my home, which is a good shelter, but you won't find it without me. So please spare my life. And Turin agrees and asks him, "So where is your home?" And Mime says, "It's on that mountaintop of Amon Ruth." And of course, Turin remembers what he told to Beleg, which was, "You can find me in Amon Ruth." So he says, "Okay, let's go there." So Mime leads them up to Amon Ruth and one of the things that the outlaws notice. Let me bring back this picture of it because you can see it better here. The top of the mountain is covered in a special flower called Saragon. And Saragon is it looks very blood red in certain light of day. And so when they're climbing the mountain, one of Turin's companions very ominously says, "There is blood on the hilltop." And Mime assures them, "No, that's not blood, that's just Saragon. It's a flower, don't worry about it." And now where is Mime again? Now there's Mime. So Mime, he's very old, he's very pathetic, and they get to his home, which he calls Bar and Donweth, which means the house of ransom. And when they get in, Mime is immediately met by one of the dwarves who got away, and he speaks with him very urgently, and they go off running. And Turin goes and follows him and sees Mime just despondent, crying over a dead dwarf. And it turns out that one of the dwarves that got away was shot by an arrow from one of Turin's men, and that dwarf was one of Mime's sons. And Turin is very upset by this, and he feels very guilty about this, that he and his men have killed his son. And so he pledges a payment in ransom to Mime. Basically, he says, "If ever I come into any wealth, I will pay you a ransom of gold for your son in token of sorrow, though it gladden your heart no more." And Mime agrees to this, and even though he's still grief-stricken, he still welcomes Turin and his companions into his home, and they begin the long winter. Now, winters are getting longer and harder with each year because of the power of Morgoth. So as they're cooped up in these caves, Mime begins to tell Turin the story of his people, because these are not the dwarves that we know. The types of dwarves that Mime are a part of are known as the petty dwarves, and their backstory is really kind of tragic. They were outcasts from the seven kingdoms of the dwarves way in the east a long time ago. And they made their way over into Beleriand long before any of the other dwarves did. And this was back before Morgoth had even returned to Middle Earth. And they wander the wilds, but because they are kind of lowly and pathetic, the elves, the Sindar elves, hunt them, and because they don't know what they are, and so they hunt them down. They kill them. They think they might be orc related, and so many of the petty dwarves go into hiding in caves and begin to delve out homes for themselves in the caves. And it turns out that one of these cave networks that they made was taken over unknowingly by Finrod Felagund, who then used that network of caves to create his kingdom of Nargothrond. And so they've been starving, they've been on the run, they've been living just really poor, destitute lives, and now Mime and his sons are the only petty dwarves left in Middle Earth, and they're probably not going to last very long themselves. And so Túrin listens to this story, and he feels pity for Mime, and he feels pity for his sons and for his family. And it's around this time, in the dead of this winter, that a mysterious stranger suddenly appears in the caves, in a white cloak, and everybody is immediately up in arms, getting ready to fight him. And he just laughs and throws back his hood and reveals that he is none other than Beleg. Beleg, remembering the story, remembering what Túrin had told him long ago, which was, seek for me in Amon Ruth. He did exactly that, and here he is. So when Beleg left his companions in Dimbar, he went to find Túrin in the place where he thought he would be. And sure enough, he was there, and he brings Lembas with him, and it helps to revitalize everybody. But Mime is not too happy with the presence of Beleg, because he is, first of all, he's an elf. They don't really like elves all that much because of the hunting and the taking of their lands. So Mime sort of retreats to a corner and sits very sullenly by himself. And Túrin doesn't really pay all this too much mind because his best friend is back, and they decide that they're going to go out and they're going to do some more orc slaying. And so they put on the helm again, and now with the sword and the bow, they go out and they begin routing the orcs from the land. And the word of the dragon helm returning is starting to spread across the land. And Morgoth knows exactly what the dragon helm is, and sends many orcs and spies down into the area around Amon Ruth. And there are those lovely orcs. And the orcs are tracking them and trying to find them. And once again, because this is something he does, Mime gets captured again. He gets captured by the orcs this time. And Mime makes the same offer to them that he made to Túrin, which is, I will take you to my home. Only and you can have your way with everybody. Only I ask that you don't kill. Uh, Now he was going by a different name. That's one thing I didn't mention is that Turin goes by lots of different names throughout this. When he was with the outlaws, he called himself Nathan, and when he takes on the helm again, he goes by a new name. And I'm trying to find it. Oh, okay. He's called Gorthal, which means the Dread Helm. And Eravandi is saying, basically, if Turin changes locations, he changes names. And that's very true. And he does that specifically because he believes that the name of the son of Hurin is cursed. And so he tries to hide it as much as he can. So he goes by the name Gorthal now. And when Meme is captured by the orcs, he says, please, whatever you do, don't. You can kill whoever you want except for Gorthal. And the orc captain just laughs and says, assuredly Turin, son of Hurin, shall not be slain. So he already knows. They all know exactly who Gorthal is. They know that he is Turin, son of Hurin, and they are ready. And they are ready to capture him. They want to capture him and bring him back to Angband alive. That's Morgoth's goal. And so Meme leads them into Amon-Ruth, into Baron Donwith, and the orcs then proceed to slaughter everybody. All the outlaws are taken out. Where is it? Yeah. And they capture Turin, and they take him away, and they start taking him back to Angband. Now, while they think everybody is dead, there is in fact one person who is left still alive, and that is. I'll give you 3 guesses. Could it be Beleg? Yes, Beleg is still alive. And he has a confrontation with Meme, because Meme has pretty much betrayed them all. And Meme takes up Anglachel, the Dark Sword, and tries to kill Beleg with it, but Beleg is way too good a warrior and snatches the sword back and beats the hell out of Meme, but Meme runs away, and he's still alive, and Beleg calls after him, the vengeance of the House of Hador will find you yet! And that's the last we see of Meme. And Beleg, now realizing that Turin was not killed, he was in fact... Nope. Turin wasn't killed, he was in fact captured. He heals himself up and starts charging off after the orcs. So it's kind of like I always kind of like to imagine that it's a lot like Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli going after Merry and Pippin, just like long sweeping shots of Beleg running through the fields with this orc troop far ahead with Turin in chains, and while Beleg is running after the orcs, he stumbles across a very interesting character. This is somebody who clearly was an elf, but looks just very tired and haggard and despondent. This is an elf who has been through hell, and Beleg asks him his name, and he responds, "I used to be Gwyndor, son of Gwilyn. This is Gwyndor from the near Neath Arnoediad, who led a charge into to the gates of Angband after the orcs slaughtered his brother right in front of him, and he was captured by the orcs and taken into Angband, where he was then made a slave in the mines in Angband, and through lots of hard work, through lots of torture, he eventually found a secret passage out of Angband and made his way back out into the wilds, having to go through all sorts of treacherous terrain. Gwyndor has been through hell, and uh, Beleg offers him Lembas to help revive him and to help bring him back to his former self, and um, Beleg also asks him if he has seen an orc band nearby, and Gwyndor says, "Yes, I saw one just a few days ago. They had a tall man in tow with them. They were torturing him and they were tormenting him." And Beleg knows that this is Turin, and he says, "Well, I'm going after them, and you should come with me." And Gwyndor doesn't want to go. He's trying to convince Beleg that Turin is already lost, and the only thing that you'll accomplish by going after him is getting captured yourself. Uh, but Beleg insists on going, even if that is his fate, and Gwyndor agrees to go with him. And after a pursuit, they finally come upon the group of orcs asleep in a camp, and they find Turin with them, and he's tied to a tree, and there are knives all around him from all these orcs just tossing knives at him, but deliberately missing. So like they're basically just trying to terrify him, and he's unconscious, he's haggard. Like, this is again another character who has just gone through hell. And so very stealthily, Beleg is able to take out all the wolf sentinels around the camp, and then stealthily goes into the camp, unties, and he's able to cut Turin free from the tree and take him out of the camp without raising any sort of alarm. And he and Gwyndor take Turin up to a hilltop. Turin is still he's still unconscious, and he still has his hands and his feet they're bound still. But they take him up to a hilltop, and a large thunderstorm begins to open up, and so Beleg takes the sword Anglachel, the dark sword, and uses it to try to cut Turin's bonds. And this is when Beleg makes a very tragic mistake. He cuts Turin's bonds, but he slips and nicks Turin's foot, and this rouses Turin. He's disoriented. He can't see anything. He thinks the orcs are coming back to get him again, or he thinks the orcs have come to like torment him some more. He realizes he's free, and he just rushes at Beleg and begins fighting with him, thinking that he's an orc. He can't see anything. He's crazed, and in the confusion and in the fight, Turin takes the sword Anglachel and kills Beleg. And it isn't until after he's run him through that he sees a lightning flash and sees that he has just killed his best friend. And he uh he descends into just an a terrible a terrible grief, like so bad he can't even cry. He's just completely dumbfounded. And Gwindor Gwindor tries to snap him out of it. The orcs, after the storm, see that Turin is gone. They think that he's escaped and that the storm has washed away his trail, so they head back to Angband. They don't even look for him, not realizing that he's right there. And and so yeah, Turin is just in this almost catatonic state, with Gwindor trying to snap him out of it, and finally convinces him, well, we need to have a burial for Beleg. And so they bury Beleg with his bow, and then Gwindor gives Turin Anglahel, the sword, and and convinces Turin to come with him to Nargothrond, because Gwindor was a prince of Nargothrond and they could probably find help there. They could find help, support, shelter, all that stuff. And so, again, still in a trance, Turin is like, Nargothrond, okay, let's go. And they begin to make their way to Nargothrond, and it's when they get to uh, this one river nearby, near the borders of an area called the guarded plain. Aravandi's asking, why wouldn't they just bury the sword with Beleg? It would have saved him so many problems later. Probably because Turin didn't have a sword, and Gwindor saw that it was a really good sword, and so gave it to him because it still could have some use. Um, uh, Ava is saying, I love that artwork. Yeah, that's a really good piece. I think that's done by Ted Nasmith, but I could be wrong. I'd have to look it up again. Uh, so um, so eventually they get to where is it? Oh, give me a second here. I'm sorry. I'm just okay. Okay, so they come across this pool called Aethel Ivrin, or the river Ivrin, and Gwindor tells Turin that he should drink the waters of Ivrin, and they'll help his grief. Uh, and so Turin takes a drink from the pools of Ivrin, and it's there that finally the release valve is hit, and he bursts out crying and wailing and letting all of his grief out. And it's there that he's finally able to come back to his senses, and he writes a song for Beleg called Lair Cu Beleg, which is the Song of the Great Bow. And Gwindor mentions something about the blade Anglahel. He says, "This is a strange blade, and unlike any that I have seen in Middle Earth. It mourns for Beleg even as you do. But be comforted, for I return to Nargothrond of the house of Finarfin, and you shall come with me and be healed and renewed. And so Gwyndor leads Túrin into the guarded plain and into the realm of Nargothrond, and that's where we're gonna leave it for today. So that's where that's the story of Túrin Turambar up to now. This is only the tip of the tragedy that's coming. Next week is going to be just god awful. I'm sorry. I'm just going to make that abundantly clear now. It's not going to be a pretty chapter. So yeah, we're going to leave Túrin there for now. He and Gwyndor are on their way to Nargothrond, and the next leg of the journey will begin, and it will be tragic, destructive, sad. It really is just like some of the worst tragedy that Tolkien has ever written. And I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the changes between what we read here in the Silmarillion and what is in the expanded novelized version of it, The Children of Hurin. There are some... I stole a One Ring saying, oh my, that wasn't the worst part of the story. Nope, not the worst by half. Yeah, next week is going to be hard. So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the differences between this and The Children of Hurin, which is the longer novelized version. We have a couple different characters who are in The Children of Hurin who don't make it into this version of the story. One of which is we're going to start back with Túrin's childhood in Dorlomin. After the death of Lalaith, and Túrin is very despondent. And he has a friend in Dorlomin who is very much he's sort of like a houseman for their home, and he's wounded. He used to be an axeman, but either through a mistake of his own or through just a bad or something, just bad timing happening, he accidentally chopped his foot with his own axe, and so he's hobbled. He really can't do much, but he's a very close friend and confidant to Túrin. And there's this big subplot between the two of them, and forgive me, I cannot remember the name of this guy. But there's a subplot between them where Hurin gives Túrin a knife for his birthday, and Túrin then gives that knife to his friend. And because there is this strong tradition of you never refuse a gift, Sador is his name. Thank you, Eravandi. Túrin gives him this gift of a knife, and then when it comes time for Túrin to leave and go to Doriath, which is like a much more harrowing scene in The Children of Hurin, because there's a very long conversation between him and his mother, sort of discussing the merits of him leaving and why she's staying. And Túrin doesn't want to listen to it. He doesn't want to. He's very obstinate about this, and so Sador gives gives Turin the blade back as a gift. And again, it's one of those things where it's like Sador isn't refusing the gift that Turin gave him. He is giving him this blade as his own gift. So he's basically this blade is just getting re-gifted everywhere. But it's like it's this very sad scene between him and Sador because the two of them are never going to see each other again because there's no way Sador is making that journey. Yeah, good enough. And then later on we have the trial of Turin after the death of Saros, and also the rivalry between Turin and Saros is delved into in a much deeper way in the Children of Hurin. To the point where like you really sort of see just like how much of a jerk Saros really is, and how hard it is for Turin to put up with it. And so when the last straw finally happens, like you really do sympathize with Turin on this. But at the same time we have the trial of Turin after the death of Saros, and we see a lot more with everybody giving testimony, and the only person who can really give testimony is Mablung, because he was the one who was the closest thing to an eyewitness, and he didn't really see that much, and he was relating what Turin told him. Aravandi saying, I really love the details in the Children of Hurin. I kind of wish they hadn't been left out of the film, but that would have made it even longer. Very much so. It's, I mean, what we're reading here in the Silmarillion is very much almost a Cliff's Notes version of the full story, which lends itself very well to this show because I could talk about the Children of Hurin at length because there's so much going on. But because Mablung was the only one who got any sort of sense of what actually happened with Saros, he's the one who testifies to Thingol, but he doesn't have all the information. So Thingol, based on this testimony, thinks that Turin deliberately killed Saros. And so he doesn't... his judgment initially is to banish Turin and to bar him from ever returning to Doriath. And he does this with a very heavy heart, but he's pretty much like the evidence is against him, and that's when Beleg comes in with a special surprise witness, who is this elf maiden who, again, I forget her name. I believe her name is like Nellis or something like that. She used to be a friend of Turin back when he was a kid, and they would go wandering in the woods together, and they spent a lot of time together. And she was always, even though afterwards Turin kind of moved on and started to learn warcraft, she always kind of followed him around. And so she saw everything that happened between him and Saros, and so she gives full eyewitness testimony to everything. And that's when Thingol realizes that this really wasn't Turin's fault, and he pardons him. So it's very interesting in the Children of Hurin just reading how close Turin came to being found guilty. And that Thingol was not using his love for Turin as an excuse to be kind of lenient on him, which was kind of the impression that I got from how it plays out in the Silmarillion. But that's clearly not the case here. Like, Thingol is just weighing the facts, and initially the facts point to, or the facts as he as he receives them, point to Turin is guilty and must be punished. And then we get new testimony, and we see that he actually wasn't. And Thingol again is going straight off of the facts and the testimony, and so we see a much more even-handed type of Thingol in this story. And then lastly, there is the giving of gifts. The gifts that Thingol and Melian give to Beleg as he sets out. There's a when Beleg first goes out to find Turin. This is where it changes from what's in the Silmarillion a little bit. In the Silmarillion, he is given Anglachel the sword and the gift of Lembas at the same time. But in the Children of Hurin, he's actually given the sword before he leaves to find Turin the first time, when he's first captured by the outlaws. And then when he comes back and relays all that story to them, that's when Melian gives him the gift of Lembas. So it actually is in two parts. And also we learn a lot more about the outlaws that Turin is running with. And this is as far as I've gotten into Children of Hurin. We see a lot of like how Turin has to prove himself to the outlaws, how there's a very strong, like, I won't say rivalry, but kind of like a lack of trust between him and certain members of the outlaw band. And also how Turin ends up becoming the captain of this group of outlaws, which I don't want to spoil because it's actually a pretty fascinating story. Yeah, so I don't want to like do too much comparing of the Silmarillion to the Children of Hurin because we could be here all day, but I think the Children of Hurin is a much stronger story just because it fleshes out the characters and the details so much more. Like the Silmarillion, and this is true throughout the Silmarillion, is that we sort of only scratch the surface of what's going on. We only sort of get like the barest of details because this is about 300 pages and it's telling about 3,000 years of history. So it's very sparse on the details. But I think this is a testament to how good of a writer Tolkien is. He's able to really sort of take it and flesh it out in a way that you wouldn't really expect. Or he fleshes it out in a way that even with just little bits of dialogue and little bits of description, he's able to paint this very lavish and very enthralling picture of Middle Earth and of these characters. Like even with just this little bit here, like I mean, I really feel like sad when these characters die, because a lot of characters die and many of them you don't get to know all that well. But it looks like people are leaving the chat. Okay. I don't know if the feed has stopped or what, but I should probably bring this to a close now anyway. So, I mean, we're ending here with the death of Beleg, which is a pretty strong death. Like, we've encountered this character a lot, but still, I would say like he's not so developed that in less capable hands, you would probably not feel as strongly for him as you do, or at least as I do, in reading this. I feel like he's such a good character. He has such a good heart, and a lot of the scenes between him and Turin, you really see that bond of friendship between them. So it's very gut-wrenching when you hit the scene where Turin flies into madness and accidentally kills him, because it's pretty much like the worst thing that could happen. But that's only the worst thing that could happen so far. Next week, it's gonna be tragic. Bring your tissues. Bring napkins. Like, just get ready for just absolute tragedy, absolute cry fest. This is a very hard chapter, and it's a very tragic chapter. And one of the things I find interesting is that in the beginning of it, Tolkien says that it plays into the wider story of the Silmarils, but I would say only in a very tangential way. Like, this is very much self-contained. There are large events that happen around the situation, but the story of Túrin himself is very self-contained. So I would say, yeah, this is gonna be a fun story. This is gonna be a fun next week. A lot to get through. A lot of tragedy. Túrin Turambar is a very, very tragic story. And the hits just keep on coming, because after that's done, then we have 2 back-to-back tragic stories. So yeah, while last month was the month of high adventure and romance, this month is the month of just god awful tragedy. So looking forward to that, aren't we all? So I will see you all next week for part 2 of the story of Túrin Turambar. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you, Eravandi and I Stole the One Ring, and Ustreamer 21961 for hanging out. And I know Ava was here for a while, but it seems like she is gone now. So thank you all for coming. I will see you all next week. And as much as you may want to after this, never stop reading.